Negative gearing, positive gearing. Everyone has an opinion. Some say negative gearing is the only way to build wealth. Others say positive cash flow is the smarter play. But here's the reality.
Most people arguing about negative and positive gearing actually don't understand it. In this episode, we're going to break down exactly what each strategy does, who they're for, who they're not for, and how smart investors actually use both to build serious portfolios. Welcome back to another episode of the Finance Bible podcast. Zeke here.
And your co-host Oscar. But before we get into it, please note that nothing in this podcast should ever be considered as personal financial advice.
Although, if financial advice is what you are seeking, let us know. We can get you in touch with the correct team.
But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Let's get into it. Welcome back. Here we are. We're here again. You will have heard our beautiful voices last week, and you're about to hear them again right now. Or you are currently hearing them. How lucky.
Lucky listeners.
Yeah, well, as you heard in the trailer, we're going to be talking about positive and negative gearing. Now, first of all, I just want to come out and say something outrageous. Negative gearing, I'm not a fan.
Neither am I.
And when I say not a fan of negative gearing, I don't mean I'm not a fan of negative gearing. I mean I'm not a fan of how people do negative gearing. So,
and
what
how
I mean by
properties, how they buy properties for negative gearing.
Yes, and what I mean by that is people will look at properties and go, okay, it cost me $1.5 million. It rents for $600 a week. Yes, I'm going to be negative. That is a terrible strategy. They're like, yeah, so many tax benefits. It's actually possible to buy a property with positive income, good yield, 800K property, renting $900 per week, and still get negative gearing on paper because you've got things like depreciation and loan costs and so on and so on. But week by week, you're not feeling that crunch of having the negative gear. And I just think that, personal opinion, if you're buying property or doing something purposefully to make less money, you're a goofball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like why wouldn't you buy a property where it almost pays for itself? Well, let's just say it's neutrally geared and you're not feeling the pinch out of your own pocket and you're still making money with capital growth. And then come tax time, like Zeke said, on paper, you're still technically at a loss, so you still help yourself. So I would much prefer that than paying $200 or $300 per week out of my own pocket just for a little tax refund at the end of the year.
It's like when people are going ahead and they're like, oh, I'm not going to do overtime this week because I have to pay an additional 10 cents in tax per dollar. It's like, but you're still making that extra.
I'd rather make
40
money.
cents.
Yeah.
50 cents, 60 cents, whatever you're making.
$400 and nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you not want to make more money to pay less tax?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think, especially in Australia, a lot of people think negative gearing is the only way in buying investment properties. Reason being, there's so many companies out there who kind of struggle to find good properties which rent well and are close to neutrally positive. Like we've spoken to many different teams we work with, and the common thing they always tell us is we're one of the only companies they've spoken to and work with who actually find good properties which can help be neutrally to positive cash flow, which is so rare as it seems like in this country, which is bizarre.
I would not have thought that.
No, I think it's, well, firstly, I would think it's common sense to want a property that pays for itself or close to. But negative gearing, what it basically means is your rent is less than your expenses. So you run at a loss and the loss reduces your taxable income, which is why people think it's a really good idea. So difference with positive gearing, opposite, your rent covers your expenses and you run at a profit. So in terms of that, you'll increase your taxable income at the end of the year.
Yeah, realistically, negative gearing, you're betting on having capital growth and you're getting a little tax deduction. Positive gearing, you can still get capital growth, but you're hoping for a positive cash flow where you're not going to be expending all of your money each week towards paying the property.
Yeah, I think the issue is a lot of people think that to have a cash flow property is basically means you're forfeiting the capital growth potential.
Yes, which is completely bogus.
Yeah, it's just not true at all. Like we've got like the properties we're doing on the West Coast a few years ago, 600-700K renting for $900 a week. Ridiculous.
Yeah, absolute freak show.
And now you look at those property prices, we're talking nearly $1 million. More, some of them. Yeah. So it just shows you that you can still make good money with an investment property and not feel the sting in your own pocket.
Yeah, so a lot of people will go out and, if we're just going to talk a little bit of numbers as an example, they'll buy, say, $1 million Sydney property or $1 million
Oof.
Melbourne property that rents for $600 a week. We're talking like a 1 bedroom unit in a decent location. And they'll be like, yes, great, so happy. I've got $1 million property that's negative bulk cash per week. And obviously that's going to be an older property if that's what it is. And it's rented for $600 per week, so they don't get much depreciation. They just get the loss on the interest versus the rent, and the ongoing costs and everything. And they go, cool, I'm offsetting my income. I'm reducing my taxable income. But the other way around is if you get something for $800K that can rent for $950 a week, then they look at it as, oh no, I have to pay more tax because I'm making more money. But if you're doing that and there's something new, you get depreciation, it works out roughly the same anyway, but you don't have to expend all your money and you increase your serviceability because you're not losing money each week.
We've spoken to clients in the past who always talk about how can we get to our next property in the next 1 to 2, 3 years. We present them a property which is, positively cash flow. And a common thing, which they always say first before they go ahead with it, is no, I want a negatively geared property to help with our tax. And it just blows your mind because if we can give you a property which is positive, also helps you with your tax, but doesn't affect your own pocket, why wouldn't you do that? And that just comes down as well to which demographic does positive or negative gearing suit. So generally speaking, if you're on a really, really high income earners generally look at the negative gearing aspect for the tax reasons. But like I said, you can still get those benefits with a positively geared property. But if you're first time jumping into an investment property and you're wanting a negatively geared property, well, I hate to tell you, it's really not going to help you much in terms of until you get your tax refund. Because if you're like many Australians at the moment who are struggling to get into the property market and struggling to save up that deposit, I would hate to save my deposit for 3 years and then buy a property and then all of a sudden I am paying $300 a week plus my rent that I'm, if I'm rent vesting, I'm still going to pay rent. $300 plus, $600 where you're living, that's almost $1,000 a week.
And then your serviceability is shot. You can't get another property for at least 5 years. You're relying on the capital growth to use the equity, but guess what? Your serviceability's short.
And that's what I was going to say before. With the clients who want to buy a property in 1 to 2 years, they don't understand that having a positively cash flowed property will propel them to the next 1, 2, 3, 4 properties.
I'm going to throw out a strange analogy here, and let me know if this actually makes sense or not, because I actually don't know. I'm just rolling with it. Negative gearing to me is like eating a lettuce-only diet to lose weight.
Yeah,
Positively geared property or good renting property with depreciation is like eating a good protein diet where you're still coming in, getting some benefits, and you're growing, you're doing things well. Whereas lettuce, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. You're destroying your body. It's not going to be good long term.
So you're destroying your finances.
Yeah.
And then, that's a good point. And the funny thing is, though, if you're all keen about negative gearing, what about if you've bought the property in the wrong location? What if you're paying $300 a week for this negatively geared property, but it never goes up in value, or it's $50,000 over 7 years? Well, that is a trap a lot of people fall into as well, because you want the growth, you want the income, you want the tax benefits, but the problem is don't buy blindly, like we said in last week's episode. You got to make sure where you're buying are areas that are going to move. Otherwise, it's literally pointless.
I just still can't get my head around the fact that you'd rather spend more money to lose more money to pay less tax when you can spend the same money or less, make more money, and dollar for dollar, sure, you might pay more tax in the long run, but you make more anyway. So it completely baffles me. I never understand it, never will, never have, and I can sit down and do so many logistical calculations to show the long-term impact of such, but we won't do that right now.
But in terms of positive gearing and like clients who it suits as well, generally speaking, individuals who want immediate income. So get a property, rent it out, you're making money. Also, as you mentioned before, it helps with the scaling strategy. So for ourselves and people who come to us and say, we want to make, we want to obtain 2 to 3 properties in the next 2 to 3 years. Well, here you go. Cash flow positive property, in our eyes, is the way to go to help you do servicing and increase your overall income.
I also think as well, if you're going to sit down and you're going to break down a long-term property strategy, like let's just say we're actually thinking about it long-term. Okay,
Let's think about long term.
capital growth. Let's say you get a unit in a capital city
Yep.
and it grows from 1 million to 2 million in 10 years, which is pretty feasible. That's not
That's the
inaccurate.
average.
Yep. And it's renting for $600 per week at the start and then call it $1,000 per week at the end. When you reach that point in 10 years' time, let's say you do 55 to 65, you want to hang up the boots at 65, then at that point in time, cool, you've got a $2 million asset, it's paying you $1,000 a week. But if you go the other way around and you buy something for, let's just say, let's go the same value, keep it easy, 1 million, but it's renting for 1,300 a week. So it goes up to 2 million, and then it's renting for, let's say, $2,000 a week. Then for the same amount of capital, you're getting double the rent. So when you hang up the boots at 65, you can get paid $2,000 a week to live in retirement, as opposed to the $1,000 a week. Which would you prefer? Like, it's that simple. And guess what? If you get the capital gain strategy and the negative gearing strategy, you can sell that and sure, you've made $1 million. But guess what? The other way you have as well, one of them is just paying you an extra $1,000 per week in rent. So, yeah, baffle me some more.
Do you want money in your pocket or not?
I do.
That is the question.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think the media and the government helps with always talking about negative gearing and how good it is. I do feel like as well, though, it's a bit of an old play, like an old style of an old strategy I'm trying to get at.
It's just Australians hate tax.
Well, yeah, but I feel like it's the advisors and the property investment guys 20, 30 years ago were all obsessed with negative gearing. Like, let's get a negatively geared property. This is going to be perfect for you. And I feel like it's slowly, getting out of fashion, slowly, but it's still getting smashed.
And if the government makes the changes they're looking at making, then negative gearing may be negatively impacted.
Yeah, so if you jumped into that early, well, you might be in strife.
Yeah. But we won't talk about them until they actually happen. We'll probably do an episode on that when the time comes. But that's really all I've got to say about negative gearing and positive gearing. I think common sense.
Pretty obvious from the start of this episode. We've shown our true colours of which side of the fence we sit on. And we will always sit on that side of the fence because it's achievable. And if you're, like, obviously Property Australia at the moment, you've had WA, which has been really affordable and the rents are really high. Now the prices have caught up and the rents are, not as positive as they were. Queensland is the same. So for ourselves, you've always got to pivot and look for the next location because there's always positively geared options out there. But if you're looking in the same location for 10 years, you're not going to find it. So if people tell you out there, which I know people do, that they don't exist, well, they are lying because there's so many good opportunities out there where you can get the good cash flow and the growth. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to talk about.
We've literally all I've got
done a bit of a rant.
Now I'm just sitting here thinking how annoyed I get talking about it.
Yeah, I think we've hit the nail on the head, and we love cash flow positive properties and we don't like negative gearing. So
improve your serviceability, do yourself a favor, positive income, happy days, ciao.
Yep, see you next time. Ciao.
Well, that is the end of the episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know exactly what to do. Hit that follow button, like button, subscribe, share it to your friends, families, or even a co-worker. If you're really feeling generous, you could send it off to an ex. But catch you next time. Hope you enjoyed it. Dale. Ciao.